Yeah. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for being very patient this evening. Unfortunately, our host for this evening, Mr. Shorjesh Mukherjee of our library subcommittee, is facing severe technical problems and unable to join, and had to extend the time from 6 to 6:08 just to allow him to, or give him that benefit of joining, but he's just called and said he's unable to log in. I don't want to keep all of you waiting, and definitely our guest who's here this evening, Mr. Shantanu Datta. So he's just sent me the introduction, Shantanu, and I will, on his behalf, do it. On behalf of Shorjesh, may I just do it for him? So this is what Shorjesh writes, Shantanu. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's library event on the book Calling Elvis, Conversations with Some of Music's Greatest, a Personal History by Shantanu Datta. Shantanu was born in Calcutta and went to school at La Martiniere for Boys and then Presidency College. He began his tryst with journalism at the Telegraph in 1987 and later headed editions of the Indian Express and the New Indian Express in Mumbai, Pune, and Bangalore. As a journalist for over 3 decades, Shantanu has written, as he loves to say, on everything from election rallies to rock concerts and events that occur in between. His articles on politics, society, film, and music have appeared across news, features, and opinion sections of newspapers. He began a second stint in the Telegraph in 2007, and now he's with the Telegraph Online. He will be in conversation with our member and my colleague Sumit Ray, to whom let me hand over now. So with that, thank you, Shorjesh. I am formally handing it back to me. And once again, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this wonderful event. As you know, the library subcommittee of the Bengal Club has been hosting wonderful programs over the last couple of months, which have been very challenging. And I think I can proudly say to our Bengal Club members and their guests that of all the clubs in Kolkata, this is one club who has, barring the challenges of the pandemic, continued to give members great events from the library and other entertainment right through the virtual program, and really appreciate that all of you make time and log in. And I know it's kind of a stress and strain to kind of watch and hear always on a virtual platform, but I really appreciate and thank you once again for being with us this evening. Also, great pleasure and honor to welcome my childhood buddy, Shantanu Datta. So Shantanu and I started our education together. I think we started our education in lower nursery in La Martiniere together. So that's how long back we go. And Shantanu, with all humility, I must say that in all the years that I've known you in school, until I read your book, I didn't realize what an amazing music aficionado you've been, and an amazing amount of knowledge and talent that you had, which somehow you kept very low profile in school. And obviously you are one person that I think in our batch where profession and passion have kind of played a great destiny in your life, and you've allowed your passion to also interweave with your profession. And I think the stint after presidency and your years in journalism has helped you put this excellent book together, which is full of your anecdotes and your memories and all the interviews that you've had with these great people. So before we begin, Shantanu, I think you have a small little introduction for our members. So may I request you to play that little video to set the mood for the evening.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Shantanu. Ladies and gentlemen, that was really a prelude or a preview to the book. If you've not read it, I would suggest that you should get a copy. It's a wonderful, wonderful collection of his entire journey with some of the greatest legends of music. But before we begin, may I also request all of you, since you're muted and it's on a Zoom platform, I'm sure some of you or most of you will have a lot of questions for Shantanu at the end of this session. So request you to please post the questions on the chat box on your Zoom platform. At the end, with the limitations of time, I will ensure that I try and ask him all the questions. So as he keeps talking and as we keep interacting, please do feel free to keep popping up the questions in the question box. So Shantanu, before we let me start by saying that this has been a great, great compilation, and I think it's your years of hard work that you've put in together. And going through the book, I see you have face to face and through the mail met a lot of the legends of music, like Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull, or Roger Waters of Pink Floyd, or Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits, and so on and so forth, and Indian musicians as well, some who you've been very close to, and also the jazz masters of Herbie Hancock and so many other people. So the first question is that, having met all these people across this vast span of time, was there one common feature that you picked up that makes these legends so great? Having talked to them and interacted with them, what is it that makes them who they were or in their time
That's
across?
that's, uh, that's a lovely way to begin. But before that, let me just say how happy and proud I am to be with you guys and everybody at the Bengal Club. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that wonderful introduction, Sumit. So yes, the first thing is that what struck me is their single-minded dedication to very few things. One is the attention to detail and the practice sessions, which is Riyaz. The other, that they were all so, they were devoted to. And then in the end, the truthfulness and the honesty of performance. That's the second part, because if you don't have that, you can't reach out to people like us who are in the audience. And third, uh, I guess it's a calling to sort of achieve something which is unachievable. They are searching for that perfection. They are constantly in sort of reinventing themselves. And for instance, when I spoke to John McLaughlin, I remember asking him this: that does the guitar sort of throw up any challenges to you at this stage? He was in Bangalore. That was in 2003, and he was, it's so many years ago. And he sort of just immediately shot back and said, yes, it still does. I'm still managing to work it out, and I still have very bad days. And the funny thing is, Keith Richards tells me, "You kidding me? I still can't play Scotty Moore's solo and he names this Elvis song." So I think that's the key. Where they be they Indian musicians, be they Western musicians, the music, and it's a very lonely pursuit, and they seem to like that. The pandemic, in many ways, it's changed our lives. And in the last 1 year or so, 9 or 10 months, we are all leading lives that we are not used to leading. And I asked this question to Amyt Datta, who's also featured in my book, and he says, yes, I'm terribly sad that I can't perform outside, but I also must tell you and confess that being alone at home and practicing is something that we always do. So in a sense, it's just that I have more time. I'm just spending more time with myself, and I'm just getting the time to work on my instrument. Now, I think that's a fantastic way of looking at things. And it's possible only if you are a musician, you're an artist, you're a creative person, and that's the most stunning thing to me.
That came through. That is wonderful. So therefore, the next question, Shantanu, which comes very logically from your answer, is what was your calling to put this book together? So what inspired you and why did you do it?
Uh, it started off with this concert that was happening far away in the States. It was called the Desert Trip. And, the stalwarts of music were playing together over 2 weekends. The Rolling Stones, Paul McCartney, Neil Young, Bob Dylan. And when I saw this, of course, I was very upset with some of my friends who you know, and they were going for this concert, and I was in Cal, and this was in 2016, 17, end of 2000. And and I said, it's quite amazing to think that these guys are all rock star granddads, you know, they're over 70, and they still play their music, and all of us are still yearning to listen to them. So it was a very simple question. Why do we go back to them? Why do we keep going back to them? What is the new aspect in a song that we discover when we've heard it so many times and we hear it again? And in that concert, Mick Jagger played a Beatles song. It's called Come Together. Now I said, that's something, Rolling Stones playing a Beatles song, and he introduced it as a song by this unknown beat group, which was something. And I said that, you know, I couldn't speak to Mick Jagger when he was in India, but surely I did speak to Keith Richards, and something came back to me. And Keith Richards had told me in the interview that, you know, we were discussing George Harrison's passing and Lennon's passing and the fact that they were not there. And he said, yes, I miss them dearly. And, you know, sometimes we used to tell each other that we should perhaps we should have all been in the same band. Now that's a wonderful thing to say. And I was reminded of that. And that's which sort of prompted me to go back to my old interviews to try and check, you know, try and see if they hold any relevance, you know. And after so many years, after all, these people have been speaking often, and, you know, in the West, there are far lengthier, far more exhaustive interviews. And I realized that they do make sense to a music fan growing up in a city like Calcutta or a city like Bombay or Chennai or in India, far, far away. And it was about me listening to their records. And then suddenly these names that are there in the center circle of vinyls when they are spinning on the turntable, they sort of come alive in front of you. And I said, why not share this? You know, something which touches you deeply, you feel like writing and recording it. That's how it started. And I attempted to sort of put them all together and see if I was almost sure nobody would publish it. And when I spoke to the publishers, when it was ready, it took me about 2 years to write, because you know, I still had a job at that time and in work and things like that. And so when I approached the publishers, and the only publisher which sort of showed interest and said that there was something in it was Speaking Tiger. But the editor of Speaking Tiger, the publisher, Mr. Ravi Singh, he suggested that I put in a bit of my growing up years and the reasons why I took to their music in the book. And we did a few back and forths of drafts and things like that. And I was actually not very keen to write about myself at all, because in the end of the day, I mean, where do I come in the music of a Jethro Tull, the brilliance of Tull playing the flute and that fantastic lyrics. But he kept on telling me that, no, it's also about how we, in a faraway land in India, a place like India and Calcutta, react to them. So that's how I sort of tried to weave in the personal along with
yeah, which is very, very, very clear when you read through the narrative. And therefore, the next question is, so why the name Calling Elvis? We know it's a song dedicated to Elvis by Mark Knopfler and Straits, but why did you choose that? I mean, I've read the book, so I kind of have a preview to what it is.
Yeah.
But would you like to share with our viewers today?
I used to write a music column in the Indian Express when I was in Delhi, and it was called Calling Elvis. So in a way, it was my personal tribute to that column. And the name, I chose that name then because it's a lovely song, and maybe we should just play it. And I chose that song, and because here was a song dedicated to Elvis, talking about his. Now, Elvis is this unique figure. You know, he is you know, a rebel, and he did things which nobody could, and he has sort of captured the imagination of performers all over the world. And how else or who else can you imagine would have inspired a person like, say, Ananda Shankar? Now, Ananda Shankar was, you know, born and brought up in a family that is steeped in classical traditions. Yet, he heard an Elvis song and he was inspired to sort of play it on the sitar. You have Teddy Bear and you have Jumping Jack Flash, which used to be a signature tune of one of a very popular radio program. So that's the whole idea. And the song, the lyrics and what it says in the song was all about, the sort of acknowledging a debt to Elvis, the way he was and what he did. So the lyrics, I think I sort of immediately warmed up to the lyrics. And I think in the end, it is this sentiment with which I wrote this book, tried to sort of put it together, that it was our way of saying thank you to all these legends who have given us joy for so long. And, the song goes like this, calling Elvis. Is anybody home? Well, tell him I was calling just to wish him well. Let me leave my number, Heartbreak Hotel. Oh, love me tender. Baby, don't be cruel. Return to sender. Treat me like a fool. Calling Elvis. Is anybody home? No, that's a fantastic way of saying thank you.
Thank you. So
I think if you're okay with it, we'll just hear 2 lines of that song and then see how it.
Oh, that'll be wonderful. Yeah, sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So I will immediately sort of try and share my screen and.
Calling Elvis, is anybody home? Calling Elvis, I'm here all alone. I didn't leave the building, I couldn't get to the phone. Calling Elvis, I'm here all alone. Well, tell him I was calling, just to wish him well. Let me leave my number, Heartbreak Hotel. Oh, love me tender, baby, don't be cruel. Return to sender. Treat me like a fool. Calling Elvis, is anybody home? Calling Elvis, I'm here all alone. Didn't leave the building, couldn't get to the phone. Calling Elvis, I'm here all alone. All right. You gotta tell him he's still a man. A long distance baby, so far from home. Don't you think maybe you could put him on? Tell him I was calling just to wish him well. Then within my number, Heartbreak Hotel. Oh, love me tender, baby, don't be cruel. Return to sender, treat me like a fool. Calling Elvis, is anybody home? Calling Elvis, here all alone. Leave the building, get to the phone. Calling Elvis, I'm here all alone.
Wonderful. That was wonderful. When you are actually talking about it and you go back to the music. But let's come back to the beginning of your book, Shantanu.
Yeah.
A lot of your narrative is, Calcutta obviously seems to play a huge part in the narrative, and understandably so. You're born here, you grow up. But, especially for all of us who live in the city, who love the city, and people kind of curse the city. And today, as you know, people don't look at Kolkata as the city that it used to be. How did the city really, what was so special about it in shaping your love for music, and what did it do? Because I know that the city has really done a lot in the past, and it's played a huge role in the music and how music went to other parts of the country. So, and you talk about it and the influences that in your book you've talked about Baul and other Shama Shongit and Shottujite music and things like that. Can you share with us how has that shaped your love for this?
Yes. I didn't realize this, to what extent the city played such a major part in our growing up. And while rewriting the book, that's when it sort of struck me. And something which is so obvious, you sort of tend to ignore it. I mean, just think about it. Any kid, all of us, born in this city, the first piece of music and oration he or she hears is Mohishashur Mordini on Mohalaya Day. That's played in every single household, and we sort of, that's the first, that's the original thing. And then in our homes, I grew up just like many of us, and almost all of us who are in the group today, that we heard music at home, and it used to be an eclectic mix of all kinds of things. You had Rabindra Sangit, you had Ravi Shankar, and you had these 45 RMPH, the Ventures records, maybe an Elvis single, Ananda Shankar playing, sitar and some Western stuff. And in school, we sang hymns in the morning prayer. And then after school, we used to rehearse for Bengali Cultural Evening. And we were taught Dhone Dhanne Pushpo Bhara. So it's an amazing mix of uh, cultural sounds that we were exposed to when we were young, and it sort of happened seamlessly. It was not an effort in that sense. It just happened. That it was the most natural thing to come back home and put on a Beatles record, and then maybe in the evening when your mom says, "I've had enough of that. Let's just play Otul Prasader Gan," and we sort of listen. So that's the first part of it, and so that's why you will find, I mean, I included a chapter on Srikanto Acharya, who's a singer of Rabindra Sangit, one of the young singers, and whom I hold very highly. So that's a chapter on Rabindra Sangit and the deep impact it had in our lives. So it's possible, it's definitely possible for all of us to like a Rolling Stones song and at the same time find meaning in it, and find meaning in a Jethro Tull song, and seamlessly move on to a Rabindra Sangit and find equal joy and meaning in that. So so this city is amazing in that way. And then just imagine the kind of music that was being produced in the city. On the one hand, you had Park Street. You had Park Street, wherein musicians, all the best musicians of the country would come and play. We were very young. We've heard this from our uncles and our dads. And when I spoke to Louis Banks, he told me of this lovely story that he used to play with his father's band in Kathmandu, and he had become quite an accomplished player. And then one day somebody who had come and he was singing with this lady who was singing with them, at the end of the gig said, Louis, you should now go to Calcutta because there are at least 10 other piano players who are as good as you there. So he did. He realized that, and so he did come to Calcutta, and then you know what happened. I mean, how he got picked up and all that story is also there in my book, and it's well known. So there's Park Street. And then you have these bunch of college lads and lads who are out of college who used to think differently. They heard music and that influenced them in the way they were talented, more talented than at least people like us, and they made their own music. So you had Dilip Balakrishnan, who did high, joined in with the likes of Nandan Bagchi and Lou Hilt, and they composed their own music. And these were not derivatives of rock music. These were original songs. And somewhere down the line, their music there is a CD, of High. It's called High Again, the only one, which was sort of patched together with crude recordings. It's been brought out by HMV. It shares space in my CD cabinet with the giants of music who they were influenced by. So that's something. That's really something. Simultaneously, while Dilip and Lou and Nandon and Shubir and Dwight were making their own music, across town somewhere else, there was this band called Mohiner Khoraguli. They did Bangla rock songs written in Bangla, sensitized in Bangla, modern poetry. It was amazing. It was amazing. We did not realize this then. I realized it much later when I went to college, and even when I was writing this book, that there was this, and both groups, when I talked to them, both sort of knew each other's existence, but they sort of didn't interact, but they were doing their own thing. And I think that's fantastic. And Dilip was this hugely talented person. It's unfortunate that he is no longer with us. And so was Monida of Mohiner Khoraguli. He is also passed away. But, they were these, pillars who managed to do things with the music they heard, and it's pure originality. Maybe I should play a Dilip song for everybody.
Yeah, just before you play that song, Shantanu, I have just one more question, because the beginning of the book, because I have to keep going back to the book. Before we went to the Western legends, a lot of it talks and starts off with the forebearers of Indian rock, and obviously him being one of them. So can you share with our audience and viewers a little bit about how they were influenced and what happened and your interactions with them, and then we can definitely have a Dilip Balakrishnan number.
The audio was a little disturbed. Can you just repeat that question?
Yeah, I said that in the book, as you go to the Western legends and you start, as your career progresses, you interview and you share that with your readers, you talk a lot about the forebearers of Indian rock. Right? So could you share what has been the takeaway after meeting them? What inspired them? Because they were really big stalwarts in their times. We don't see them now. So before you play that, can you share that and then take us through another number?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What Lou told me was that, yes, they didn't think of themselves as forebearers of music at that time. For them, it was the most natural thing to do, to write music, their own music. And they started off as cover bands, but slowly and steadily, they would slip in one or two of their own songs as they were playing their concerts. And they realized the reaction to those songs were as enthusiastic as was for any other song of the Stones or the Grateful Dead, which they were doing. And so that gave them the confidence and impetus to continue with that. And they loved doing what they did. They didn't care about financial returns. All those things didn't come to their mind. They were just a bunch of young fellows who loved doing what they loved to do. And another thing which I realized much later is that, you'll remember, we didn't have access to much music in those days. It was a favorite aunt or an uncle who would once upon a time go to the States and bring a few albums, and we would all sort of crowd around the stereo system and listen. So it was they who introduced us to many of the songs. I remember hearing a Grateful Dead song being played by High for the first time. I mean, that was how I was introduced to Grateful Dead. Not just me, all of us, many of us. They've played Who Do You Love? I heard them first sing that song. I didn't hear the original when I heard them. So they were our windows to the world of music, unwittingly so. I mean, we didn't realize it then. But then they are the ones who sort of introduced us to music, Traffic, the Stevie Winwood songs. They would play them. These are damn difficult songs to play. It requires a very high degree of musicianship to pull these off. But they did it. They did it.
So are we going to have another number?
Yes, we'll have another number now.
Another number before we go on. Yeah.
Right.
And if you can just talk a little bit about the number before you play it for you.
Yeah, this is a song. It's called "Who's in Charge." I climb every mountain. I sail many seas. I could not get to see you. I heard about you so much. I followed you around the world, in the press, on the radio, on TV. Is it you? Who's in charge out here? Now this could be about anybody. It could be about. And you must sort of. So this is one of their simpler, lyrics-wise simpler songs. But Dilip has also written. He's put together a suite of songs called Tolkien's Suite. And he's put Tolkien's poetry and prose to music. Unfortunately, I can't play that because that has huge copyright issues, and the Tolkien estate would have none of it, that they do not want that published. But I know his family is working on it. And if one day, if this is made public, I can assure you it's a fantastic piece of music. We heard them. Lou and Dilip had played this song at a concert at the basement at Kalamandir. They played a 2-3 hour song, just the two of them, wherein they played this. Anyway, so now we'll go back to our...
Who's in charge?
Yeah.
So Shantanu, in fact, due to paucity of time, we have a lot of questions.
Yeah,
We'll also
right.
but I think in your book you have covered, and you are really one of those lucky ones who have shaken hands and met, legends who we've grown up with, Ian Anderson and Roger Waters and Sting and people like that. So could you kind of summarize and share some of the very interesting experiences and anecdotes that you've had with some of these great legends of rock music and what it was like? The quick ones, because I want to take it from rock to a genre of, you've done a lot of work on jazz as well. So I want to cover that as well for the audience.
Okay. It was very interesting how I got into jazz. And way back when I was a cub reporter in the Telegraph, I was suddenly asked one fine morning to write an obituary of Miles Davis after he had passed away. And I knew who he was, and maybe I heard a few tracks, but nowhere near. I did not have any of the knowledge required to write an obituary of one of the most influential figures in the world of music. So I went across to the American Center Library, and by that time I had become the member of UC Jazz Club. So I had just about started listening to music, and jazz music, I mean. And then I sort of did some research, and I did an obit. It's a fairly ordinary piece, and thankfully it got published. It wasn't spiked, but it had quotes of Miles's proteges, who said things like what they wanted to say about Miles. And they're lovely, lovely lines that, I remember, I have it written here. Miles could play more in a few notes than a lot of people play in a lifetime. That was what Herbie Hancock had said to an American newspaper. And decades later, I sort of couldn't believe it that I went on to meet the three proteges that I quoted in my piece. And these quotes gleaned from their interviews with American newspapers. So that I found was just unbelievably, I mean, something it's lucky and it's an unbelievable thing. So I sort of call it a Marquisian miracle that I could ever sort of do that. Then, but all three, John McLaughlin, Wayne Shorter, and Herbie Hancock, when I spoke about Miles with them, they all had some lovely stories to say, and McLaughlin described Miles as the Picasso of the world of jazz, and he was telling us how the most brilliant of his compositions were actually organized jam sessions. He would come into the studio with a few notes scribbled on a packet of sandwiches. So sandwiches would be distributed and the packet would remain. And that's what they would use. That would form the basis of a track. And then he would allow everybody to play. And these were all youngsters. And he had this incredible knack of spotting talent. So, if you know all the greats have played with him. And sort of they have opened up their oeuvre in music. So I think that was my meeting these three jazz greats, and then also Jean-Luc Ponty, the violinist. I met him through Dr. L Subramanian, L Subramanian had invited him to India, and that's how I met him. And Ponty told me a lot of things about his interactions with Staffan Grappelli, and how he used to jam with Django Reinhardt's son, called Babik, in the outskirts of Paris, in these gypsy tents and camps. So they were fantastic stories. These are lovely things. And we were introduced to Ponty's music when we were in college. And I have a few in the audience who will definitely know, especially Tiku from Jakarta would know. And maybe it was him who had brought that tape to college and when we heard Ponty for the first time. So if we have time to play tracks, we will. Otherwise, we can move into questions or.
Yeah, no. Just also share your experiences with the other legends of Roger Waters,
okay.
and if you can.
Roger Waters, yes, of course. Roger Waters, when he came to play in Bangalore, and this was sometime in the year 2002, and we had gone to a group of, not a group, just two of us from India had gone to London to interview him. The promoter, DNA Networks, who was bringing them, had taken two journalists from Bangalore. One was me, and I was with the Indian Express, and then the other was Times of India. Two so-called rivals, but we were friends, the two of us who went. And Alan Mendonça, he is unfortunately not with us, but he was a friend, and he used to work for the Times, and I went from the Indian Express. And I remember once we reached there on the day, on the anointed day, we were told some flunky came in and told us, "Oh, you guys from India? First of all, there won't be two interviews. There'll be one interview. And you'll have not more than 5 minutes." So, I was crestfallen. Two rival newspapers can't be sitting in one interview and, talk about a legend. That's number one. But forget that. Only 5 minutes. I had prepared 50 questions, for God's sake. My life's experience of listening to Floyd and calling friends and, getting their ideas. So anyway, when our turn came and I was carrying my wall album, the record, which my cousin had brought for me from abroad, the only Pink Floyd record I had at that time, apart from Dark Side of the Moon, I wanted to get it signed. And when he saw that, he looked at the album, he went through it, and he said, "This is pretty old. How did you get it? And you guys from India? So Pink Floyd is heard in India?" He asked me. And both of us just sort of started laughing. We just burst out laughing. And that sort of broke the ice. And he realized that these two guys who had come were fans more than journalists. And he sort of opened up and spoke to us for over an hour. And that man who told us to get sort of booted us, who would promise to boot us out
5 minutes.
5 minutes, came in thrice during the interview and he was shooed away. And ultimately, Roger Waters did sign the album and he was pretty pleased. And he said a sentence to say that that was the essence of his work. I will read that out. And if you listen to his later music, even the ones which he has toured with just last year, he's, by the way, a very vocal proponent of freedom and all kinds of things. He's always out there speaking out. That spirit of a rock musician hasn't left him. He told me all his work is essentially rooted to this one question. Quote, on the evidence that we have now, do we feel that the human race is capable of evolving to a point where we recognize what it is in life that gives us joy and what is in life that gives us pain? Is the human race evolving towards a place where it is likely to choose more joy and less pain? If you think of this, I think it's such a relevant quote, even today. Just think of where we are placed in the world, and if that is your mantra, so to speak, obviously their music is so powerful.
Great. Quick question. So with all the meetings that you've had with both Indian legends and overseas, which perhaps is not mentioned in the book, did you by any chance get a glimpse of any eccentricities? We know that creative people all have their creative little eccentricities or craziness about them, and that's why they're creative. And there are a lot of myths about it. Did you ever pick up anything that you'd like to share? Anything interesting, anything?
Well, let me just think quickly. Well, eccentricities. One was with Jean-Luc Ponty. He was very particular about the sound and what the audience will be hearing when he plays, how his violin sounds. Now, that's at a level all musicians are, but he sort of took it to another level, because I remember when they had come to Bangalore, I'd gone across to Chennai and they were playing another concert there. And I think there are monitors on stage where you get to hear how the audience is going to hear the sound, but he was not convinced. And I remember, since we were hanging around, he told us to go and stand at the backstage during sound check. I sort of wormed my way inside and to hear and see if the fifth string, some note he was playing and it was playing softly, whether I could hear it right at the end or not, that kind of a thing. And that was one. I remember. I haven't written about this, but it sort of.
You haven't, yeah. That's why I thought I would just ask.
That's what it sort of came back to me when you said so. And well, I think another one was John McLaughlin's similar meticulousness about guitar strings or something like that. But other than that, I can't recall.
Okay. I will also ask you one more question. I mean, today we are in 2020. We've all grown up we are all 60s and 70s born. We've grown up in the 80s and 90s, grew up with the music. And you said how the window of the world was open to us and how receiving an LP was such a joy for us. Today, with the digitization of music, this whole thing of collectibles having gone out, where people's attention spans have gone down, where do you see the future of these legends in the music? I mean, today it's all available. It's there. You download. You do things like that. This whole thing of preserving your LP records, preserving your cassettes, having them autographed and signed. There was a certain beauty and a certain mystique about it. Where does that go now? And as a critique of music and a music lover yourself, where do you see the future of the young generation and how do they take it forward?
It's a very interesting question and it's a tough one. I don't know whether I will be able to answer it to your satisfaction, but one, yes, the physical format of the music is slowly sort of diminishing. Though I must say, vinyls are also a
returning, yeah,
way of possessing music now, and it's happening a lot in the West. Every album that is released in the last 4 years, every jazz album, even from obscure artists who are not mainstream artists, they release a set of vinyls, even if it is a small number. So having said that, digitization has, yes, opened up music to us. It has sort of given us access to all kinds of things. I mean, and it's not difficult. You and I can sing a song and just put it up, and we'll have an audience. What it has done is also, I believe, it will it has it in journalism there's something which we tell us, the bullshit meter. Now, what is a bullshit meter? It is something which tells you that when you're writing something, it's not working. And it happened to be a lot of times while writing the book. So it's sort of an antenna that goes up and says, no, it's not going to work. So take it away. So with access to so much of good music, I think this general sense of bullshit meter among the people, among listeners is going to the antenna will be sharper. And I think just as you make a song an overnight hit, you will also drop a song overnight, or a song or a piece of music, when you realize that, after 5 listens or 10 listens, there isn't any depth. So in that context, I believe the music of these legends
will continue and will
continue, and it's going to be appreciated even more,
generations after.
Yes. My daughter in the house, she's class 10, and she has a few friends. Unbelievable. They listen to Korean pop. They used to, but they also listen to Dylan and Bruce Springsteen. It's unbelievable, and it's. I'm not. I would have said that it's just her, but it's not. They are friends. She has friends in school who listen to this music, and so they discover. Just as we discovered music on our own, the discovery of music continues. It's just that they have a larger palette, and I think
and better access than we ever
better
had.
access, better quality sound, because digital sound has improved so much over the last 10 years or so. There is audio quality lost. So they have. So I have no manner of doubt that the legends and their music
will continue.
Have,
Shantanu, I'll have to ask you to pause here because
yes.
There are some questions that the audience have already posted on the box. But before we go to the questions with the audience, and keeping in mind the time that we have, you had something that you wanted to share with all of them, a little piece that you wanted to play for all our viewers today. Would you like to play that now, or would you like to do it after the Q&A session?
I think I'll do it after the Q&A session.
Okay, great. Yeah. So let me just end my questions and open it up. The first question, Shantanu, is from Dr. Harish Mehta. Could you elaborate on the theme that you use to thread the various musicians together?
Well, the link is, it's quite strange. It's my life. And just as I said, I wrote this Miles Davis obituary in 1991 in Calcutta, and go on to meet the musicians who were quoted in the text years later in Bombay and Bangalore. So I also remember how when I was in my uncle's house, I'd gone there for a holiday in Agra, and he had a lot of music, and there was a tape which was not a pre-recorded tape. It was one of those tapes where music had been recorded, and it was untitled, and I put that on, and I hear this orchestra of guitars playing at frenetic speed. And it was fascinating. And I asked myself, God, that's the way you play guitar. And, I was sort of just hearing rock guitar. So that was acoustic jazz guitar. And then that piece was actually Mediterranean Sundance by Al Di Meola, John McLaughlin, and Paco de Lucia. So this was a 1981 recorded in San Francisco, and the album is called Friday Night in San Francisco. So I heard that when I was a kid and didn't know what was going on. And when I discovered that music, and I found it fascinating to recall that this is the piece of music that I had heard when I was in class 8 or 9 in Agra, for God's sake, not realizing what it was. And I got to ask John whether he knew. It's all those who like jazz and those who know him will know that it's a seminal album, a jazz album. So when I asked him, did they know it's a live album, and whether he realized that they were onto magic that night. And he had a lot to say about that night. And he said, yes, that the moment we started playing, we realized it's something that happens, 3 guitars playing in tune. It's unheard of, 3 acoustic guitars playing together and nothing else. It's an amazing album. Even to date, when I hear that album, there's just goosebumps. It's music of a very, very high order. So it was fantastic to link it, to like that. I hope I've sort of answered. So in similar fashion, I heard Baul, and then you hear somebody doing a jazzed up and a reggae version of a Baul song. And it's just that's the way it's. There's always a story. Music is sort of signposts our lives in many ways, and you just have to tap into it.
Right. So I'll come to the next question, Shantanu. It's from Shayan Mukherjee, and obviously he knows you very well, and Shayan's right here. So Shayan, so he says, Shantanu, not many know that you are a musician yourself, and in yesteryears you were a drummer of repute. So from one musician to the other. Rock Presidency College in the 80s. Are you still planning to get back to music after all these years?
That's so nice of you. That's so nice of you, Shayan. He was our parents were great friends, and we've lost, all of us have sort of lost our parents, but we go back a long way. Thank you so much for saying that. He's very kind. He's a bassist in a band called Jelly Bellies. You guys should hear them out. They're fantastic. I used to play, I still play a bit of music, but strictly at home. And I'm trying to get back to drumming. I have friends who do that. But I don't think I will sort of play in public anymore. I'll just sort of, let's keep it.
And if I may take the liberty of from one Martinian to the other through me, another Martinian, maybe Jelly Belly should give you a break in one of the gigs.
That's wonderful. No, this is a bonus. It's wonderful.
Okay, so back to the next question, Shantanu. It's from Orko Das. He says, hello, Shantanu Das. So good to hear and watch you speak on the book. And hi, and Moheen. The Calcutta Sound. What do you feel about the original music coming out of Calcutta in 2020 pandemic, notwithstanding?
To be honest, I haven't heard much. The ones that I've heard are very good. And I also know in the sphere of Bangla rock, there's a lot of interesting music that is coming out, not so much in Calcutta, but from the districts, from officer towns. That's a very interesting, and this, I have heard this from no less than Taposh Bapi Das, who is one of the surviving members of Moheen Ghoraguli, and he himself has a band. And he told me this, that, there is very interesting music that is coming out from the youngsters of who are not in the city, and I think that's fantastic. I have not been able to hear much of that, but I will definitely get to it.
Okay, quick wrap up from Monojit Dashgupta. Shantanu. Amazing how the greats were open to crossing genres, particularly in the later years. Interactions with any one of them on this aspect, crossing genres?
Yes, very much so. I realized, again, this is something which dawned on me after writing the book. Dr. L Subramanian, the violinist, and I wish I could play something of his, is this one person in this collection, which is a small collection of musicians, who has straddled genres like no one else. And he is extremely sophisticated as a musician. He's a Carnatic South Indian musician at heart. He studied Western music abroad at California. He knows Western music. He knows his own Eastern music. He knows very good North Indian classical music, good enough to play together. And he's equally at ease, he plays jazz and he'll play rag and he'll play at Dover Lane Music Conference, and the next morning he'll wake up and take a flight and go and play with Jean-Luc Ponty. This is an amazing feat. So I think he's a superlative musician. He's an absolutely, and I think this happened. It's a very interesting thing he told me quickly. I'll tell you quickly. In the 90s, I think in 91, Ravi Shankar called up his father and said that he would like him to take him on tour because he was touring in the States. And he had just joined the LS had just joined the California Institute where he was learning Western music. He took special permission and he toured them. It was a tour for about a year. George Harrison was also there. And in one of those places, at the end of the tour, they played at the Royal Albert Hall. And Ravi Shankar liked his playing so much. They had a concert where just he, Ravi Shankar, and LS played together. So LS tells me that this is one of the earliest times when there was a fusion of North Indian and Indian and South Indian classical music to take place. And imagine it took place in the shows abroad in America. So the first time North Indian and South Indian classical musicians played, there was a confluence of sorts in ideas in the North and South classical music. It happened with these two giants, and that too, abroad. So that's fantastic, I thought.
And I've come to really the last question for the evening, Shantanu, from Deeptesh Ghosh. He says, Shantanu, which of your interviews went in the most unexpected direction?
Yes, that was with, there are two actually. One is with Billy Cobham, the third person who's played with Miles. And I actually, of course, had very little time because he was about to go I met him in Chennai. He was there. And so his answers, and being a drummer myself, I had framed these huge, pretty large questions and technicalities and all kinds about the hi-hat and what should be the space between the two cymbals of an hi-hat, all kinds of crazy things. And I remember he was sort of replying in monosyllables. So that really got me. I didn't even have a copy to write almost. So that's why you will find the interview of Billy Cobham, the giant that he is, but it's a short interview. And Carlos Santana, I spoke to him on the phone, and he had then just brought out a record of rock classics, reimagined rock classics. And one of the songs he played was While My Guitar Gently Weeps by George Harrison. And I was expecting to, being a George Harrison fan, I was expecting him to sort of conduct the interview entirely on George and Santana and what he feels. But that didn't happen. He sort of just answered me in one or two sentences and sort of moved on. So we had to go on to discuss Woodstock and all. Part of which I had known. So I didn't want to go down that road. I wanted to ask him more about new music, but sort of it didn't happen. And it was on the phone. So I guess he sort of wanted to finish off early or whatever. But it happens.
Thank you very much, Shantanu. It has been a pleasure. And this is a subject that can go on and on and on.
Exactly.
So we have to keep a paucity of time and, be sensitive to other people and their timing and things like that. So I want to thank you. It has been knowing you for so many years in school. I didn't realize that you brought this to the table, and I hope for all our members, this book, and I would recommend now that Shantanu has made me read it and he's gifted one to me. So I'm very lucky to have that on my collectibles as well. It's available on Amazon and the Speaking Tiger website, but Shantanu has made a special because knowing that this is kind of a specialized area and everyone will not like, but if people want to read the book, he can make the book available for our members at a special price at the club. So one can get in touch with Dipankar and put up a list, and Shantanu can help arrange these copies to be delivered. So before I hand it back to Saurajesh, who has luckily the connectivity is back and has come back to give the formal vote of thanks, it's actually over to you, Shantanu, because I think you wanted to share something with our members before you bid them adieu today.
Yes, it's a 4.5 minute song. This is a song by Bob Dylan. I don't need to introduce it. The two lines of the song is what summarizes the intent of the book. And before I read those two lines, I'd just like to say it has been a wonderful experience talking to all of you. I thank you all from the bottom of my heart for the questions you have posed and, the way, the enthusiastic response. And Sumit Ray, of course, we are friends, and, it's been a pleasure, Sumit, and thank you so much for having me.
Most welcome. Thank you. My pleasure.
And I must tell you that one of our early gigs was at the Bengal Club, and we were not that good, but former of the club, Mr.
Well, I hope one day we can have Jelly Bellies perform live, and you could do the gig there and play the drums for all our members. I'm sure we'll all look forward to it.
I shall now just play that song for you. It's the two lines that I wanted to sort of mull on before when you leave. Someday everything is going to be smooth like a rhapsody. when I paint my masterpiece.
Oh, the streets of Rome are filled with rubble. Ancient footprints are everywhere. You can almost think that you're seeing double on a cold, dark night on the Spanish Stairs. Gotta hurry on back to my hotel room, where I got me a date with a pretty little girl from Greece. She promised she'd be there with me when I paint my masterpiece. Oh, the hours we'd spend inside the Coliseum, dodging lions and wasting time. Oh, those mighty kings of the jungle, I could hardly stand to see 'em. Yes, it sure has been a long, hard climb. Train wheels are running through the back of my memory, when I ran on the hilltop following a pack of wild geese. Someday everything is gonna sound like a rhapsody when I paint my masterpiece. Sailing around the world in a dirty gondola. Oh, to be back in the land of Coca-Cola. Well, I left Rome and landed in Brussels on a plane ride so bumpy that I almost cried. Clergymen in uniform and young girls pulling muscles. Everyone was there to greet me when I stepped inside. Newspapermen.
Thank you, Shantanu. And it's over to you, Rajesh.
Thank you, Shantanu, so much for this very delightful evening, particularly during this time of pandemic when we don't have that much enjoyment all around. For your thoughts, for your experiences, and for those delightful anecdotes. Thank you, Sumit, for conducting this so delightfully. And thank you, of course, to the whole audience who I think enjoyed it very much, going by the questions they asked. So it's been a delightful evening for all of us. And thank you to Bengal Club staff who has made this possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Sumit.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, till we meet again.
Yes.
And
Thank you,
stay
Sumit.
safe.
Thank you.